They said he was just a mechanic, a grease-stained cog in the vast machine of the war. No one expected him to change the course of a galaxy, but when the Helios Vanguard was seized by an enemy fleet and its command crew slaughtered in a lightning strike, it was Jax Marlowe, the ship's quiet, unassuming mechanic, who refused to let humanity fall without a fight. The moment the alarms blared and the emergency lights bathed the corridors in angry red, Jax was in the engine room, knees deep in plasma conduits and fusion cores. The chaos outside barely registered as he worked, his hands steady and calm amid the madness. Then the transmission came through the intercom, a cold, alien voice declaring the ship's surrender and ordering all humans to stand down. Jax stared at the speaker, disbelief burning in his chest. No one had told him the Vanguard was theirs to surrender. No one had asked him, and so, without orders, without a plan, he made a choice. If the warship was to fall, it would fall on his terms. He seized the engineer's console, overriding locked protocols with fingers dancing over keys. Power hummed beneath his touch, and the ship's systems responded. His heart hammered. This was no longer just a mechanic's job. This was rebellion. The enemy thought they had a prize, a human ship ready to be commandeered. They had no idea the engine room held a spark that would ignite vengeance. Jax's eyes gleamed with fierce determination as he prepared to turn the Helios Vanguard from a captured prize into a weapon of retribution. The war was far from over, and the mechanic was about to become a legend. Jax's fingers flew across the console, overriding security locks one after another. The engine room, usually a sanctuary of measured hums and steady heat, had transformed into a battlefield of its own, a fight for control against unseen digital barricades imposed by the alien invaders. Every second counted. The alien forces that had stormed the Helios Vanguard were already moving through the ship's corridors, hunting for survivors, securing their prize, but they hadn't accounted for him. His mind was a furnace of calculation and raw instinct. Years of repairing warship engines, patching damaged systems, and optimizing power outputs had given him more than just technical skills. It gave him an intimate knowledge of the Vanguard's heartbeat. He knew which systems could be rerouted, which weapons could be brought back online, and how to manipulate the ship's AI to his advantage. The first priority was control. Core integrity at 70%, Hera's AI intoned cautiously, her voice calm but wary. Hostile override protocols detected, multiple system breaches imminent. Jax's jaw tightened. The enemy hackers were trying to wrest control back, but he was faster. Not today, he muttered, fingers working feverishly. Divert power from auxiliary systems to weapons and shields. I'm not handing this ship over without a fight. The Helios Vanguard was an older model, a relic of a forgotten era, but Jax knew its quirks better than anyone else on board. The warships of today might outgun it on paper, but this ship had heart, and under his hands it was about to wake. Warning! Power reroute exceeding recommended parameters, Hera cautioned. I'll take that risk, Jax snapped. Get me weapons online. Outside the engine room, the distant clatter of combat echoed. Blaster fire ricocheting off bulkheads, shouts in human and alien tongues, the desperate rhythm of close-quarters battle. Every sound was a reminder. Time was running out. Suddenly the lights flickered, and the ship groaned under the strain. The aliens were trying to disable the engines to force a surrender, or worse, to blow the ship and kill everyone aboard. Jax's pulse raced. One misstep and the ship could explode, but surrender meant extinction. He refused. Core stability dropping, Hera warned again. We cannot sustain this power load for long. Just a little longer, Jax said, sweat beading on his forehead. He rerouted coolant flows, adjusted fusion output, and fine-tuned the plasma conduits to keep the core stable under the mounting stress. Then, with a deep breath, he activated the ship's weapons grid. Weapon systems are coming online, Hera confirmed. Railguns at 50% power, plasma turrets charging. Jax grinned grimly. Let's show them why we're not just mechanics and engineers. We're fighters. The first blast fired through the viewport, railgun slugs punching through enemy fighters like thunderclaps in the silence of space. Plasma turrets flared, weaving streams of deadly energy that shredded advancing boarding parties. The enemy scrambled to regroup, caught off guard by the sudden ferocity of a ship they thought was theirs. Jax grabbed the comm unit, voice rough but commanding. "This is Jax Marlowe, acting captain of the Helios Vanguard. To any human crew alive aboard, rally to the bridge. We're taking back our ship." Minutes passed like hours as he held the engine room, fending off boarding drones and counterattacks while the ship regained control bit by bit. Slowly the Vanguard responded, shields rising, weapons primed, engines humming with renewed vigour. Jax felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was the spark of rebellion, the captain of a warship hijacked from the jaws of defeat, and this was just the beginning. With the bridge secured and the enemy temporarily repelled, Jax prepared to face the real war, the fight to reclaim humanity's place in the stars. Because when the warlords thought humanity was beaten, they hadn't met the mechanic who hijacked a warship and declared vengeance. The bridge was chaos incarnate when Jax burst through the hatch, a battered relic barely holding itself together. Flickering consoles, shattered glass, and the acrid smell of burned circuitry filled the room. Around the command chair lay the bodies of the officers who had failed to protect the ship, or perhaps the bodies of those executed by the invaders as a warning. Either way, the ship's nerve centre was a graveyard. Jax's breath came in sharp bursts. The moment he stepped into the bridge, a surge of adrenaline pulsed through his veins, drowning out the exhaustion in his muscles. He knew the ship inside out, every console, every emergency protocol, every backup system. But now he had to command the vessel and with it the survival of every soul still aboard. "Hera!" he called out, and the AI's voice echoed softly from the speakers. "Status report. Shields at 45%. Weapons fully online but requiring manual targeting for optimal accuracy. Power levels stable for now, but diverting additional reserves will stress the fusion core." Jax nodded grimly. The ship was damaged but fight-ready, just barely. What the AI didn't mention was the enemy fleet still lurking outside waiting for their prize to falter. The holographic tactical display hovered above the center console. Alien ships, sleek and predatory, encircled the Helios Vanguard, their energy signatures pulsing ominously. They expected a surrender. They expected a broken crew. What they didn't expect was a mechanic-turned-commander, ready to turn the tide. "Patch me into all comm channels," Jax ordered. "Broadcast a message to any surviving crew." Static hissed through the speakers, then a voice, weak but alive, answered. "This is Lieutenant Aaron. We're holed up in the medical bay. Morale is low and supplies are running out." "Hold tight, Lieutenant," Jax replied. "We're taking back the ship. Help is on the way." He turned to the bridge crew he'd rallied. Engineers, technicians, even a few shaken soldiers who'd survived the boarding. They looked at him with uncertain hope. None of them had expected a mechanic to lead, but the fire in Jax's eyes spoke louder than words. "We don't have the numbers or the firepower the enemy does," he said, voice steady, "but we have something they don't, our home. This ship is more than steel and circuits. It's the last line of defense for humanity's freedom." One of the engineers, a wiry woman named Kale, spoke up. "Captain, if we can't outgun them, maybe we can outsmart them. I've been rigging the cargo bays with some of the old experimental railgun tech. Could turn the whole ship into a trap." Jax's eyes lit up. "Show me." Together they pored over schematics, mapping out how to integrate the makeshift weapons into the ship's firing control. It was risky, retrofits on a damaged ship with limited power reserves, but it was their best chance. As they worked, Jax sent out coordinated teams to secure vital sections of the ship: medical, communications, and armory. Every successful rescue lifted spirits. Every small victory was a reminder. Humanity was far from done. But the enemy was adapting too. Suddenly the Vanguard shook as a barrage of plasma bolts slammed into the shields. Alarms blared, red lights flashing wildly. "Incoming fighters starboard side!" a crewman shouted, scrambling to his station. Jax grabbed the tactical controls, fingers flying. "Focus all fire on the attackers. Use the railguns. Make every shot count." The ship's retrofitted railguns roared to life, hurling massive projectiles into the enemy ranks. Fighters exploded in fireballs, others scattered in panic. "Direct hit," Kyle yelled, a triumphant smile breaking her exhausted face. But victory came at a price. The ship trembled violently from retaliatory strikes, and power flickered dangerously. "Core stability at 20%, Hera warned. "Divert all power to shields," Jax ordered. "We can't lose the ship now." Minutes passed like an eternity. Every second was a test of nerve and skill. The Helios Vanguard danced through the enemy's assault, battered but unbroken. Finally, the attackers pulled back, leaving silence in their wake. Jax leaned back, exhaustion weighing heavily on him. He looked around at his crew, scared, tired, but unyielding. "We're not just mechanics or passengers," he said quietly. "We're the heart of this ship, and as long as that heart beats, humanity will fight back." The stars beyond the viewport gleamed with cold light, but inside the bridge burned a fierce fire. The war was far from over, but humanity had found a new captain, and the Helios Vanguard had found its spark. The bridge settled into a tense rhythm, the steady pulse of the ship's systems a fragile lifeline in the storm of war raging just outside. Jax Marlowe, now fully stepping into the role he'd never sought but had no choice but to claim, paced slowly by the tactical console. His mind was a whirlwind of calculations, possibilities, and grim realities. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded, but surrender was not an option. "Lieutenant Aaron's team reports the medical bay is fortified but running low on supplies," Jack said, eyes fixed on the holographic map. "Communications are spotty, the enemy's jamming most frequencies." Kyle, the wiry engineer who turned their cargo bays into makeshift weapon platforms, tapped at a secondary console. "I'm working on a counter-jamming signal. It's experimental and unstable, but if it works, we can re-establish contact with the rest of the fleet." Jax nodded. "Do it. We need every ally we can get." The Helios Vanguard was a patchwork of desperate innovations. Old railguns retrofitted, jury-rigged shields, hacked together AI modules. Yet despite its age and damage, it was alive. More alive than anyone had expected. Outside the viewport, alien warships swarmed like predatory sharks, their sleek hulls reflecting the cold starlight. Their commanders likely sat in their bridges, confident this captured human ship would be crushed swiftly. They didn't know about Jax Marlowe or the storm he was about to unleash. "Captain, I've detected a pattern in their attacks," Kale said suddenly, eyes bright with the excitement of discovery. "They're probing our defences, trying to find weak points, but they're predictable. Too focused on brute force." Jax smiled grimly. "Then let's give them a lesson in cunning." He called his crew together in the briefing room, a cramped space cluttered with tools, schematics, and hastily drawn maps. The faces that met his gaze were a mixture of fear, resolve, and burning determination. "We've held them off so far," Jax began, "but this is just the beginning. The enemy expects us to fold, weak, disorganized, defeated. They're wrong." He pointed to the tactical display. "They've committed most of their fleet here trying to crush us, but while they focus on brute force, we'll hit them where it hurts." The plan was audacious. Using the Vanguard's enhanced railgun platforms, they would create a series of decoys, false power signatures designed to lure enemy ships into narrow attack corridors. There, hidden mines and rapid-fire plasma turrets would ambush them, turning the hunters into the hunted. "This ship may not have the newest tech, but we have the advantage of surprise and knowledge," Jack said. "We know this ship's every secret, every quirk. The enemy doesn't." The crew absorbed the plan with a mix of hope and caution. Jax could see the shift in their eyes, the spark of belief that maybe, just maybe, they could win. Hours passed in feverish preparation. Kale and her engineering team worked through the night rigging the decoys and setting the traps. Tactical officers coordinated with survivors in isolated ship sections to secure corridors and weapons caches. Jax took a moment to check in on Lieutenant Aaron in the medical bay via comlink. "How are they holding up?" he asked quietly. "Steady considering," Aaron replied. "We've treated dozens of injuries. Morale is low, but they're holding." "Tell them to keep fighting," Jack said. "We're coming for them." With a final sweep of the ship's systems, the Helios Vanguard braced for the coming storm. The enemy fleet surged again, lured by the decoys falling into carefully laid traps. Explosions blossomed like deadly flowers in the void as mines detonated and plasma turrets tore through enemy hulls. The Vanguard twisted and turned through the battlefield, its battered hull taking punishment but refusing to break. Each ambush bled the enemy's strength, buying precious time. Yet even as they fought, Jax knew the enemy's resolve would not waver. They would adapt, come back harder. But so would humanity, because this ship, this crew, and this mechanic-turned-captain were proof that even in the darkest hours, defiance could ignite the stars. As the battle raged on, Jax stood once more on the bridge. looking out at the war-torn expanse of space. They had started as a broken crew on a wounded ship. Now they were a force, and their fight was just beginning. The Helios Vanguard groaned beneath the relentless assault. Each impact sent shudders through the hull, a harsh reminder that their fragile advantage could slip away in a heartbeat. Yet, inside the ship, the atmosphere was electric, not with fear, but with determination. The crew was no longer a ragtag group of survivors. They had become a family forged by fire, each member driven by the fierce will to reclaim their fate. Jack stood at the centre of the bridge, his eyes scanning the tactical display as new threats emerged. The alien fleet had learned from their earlier mistakes. They were more cautious now, using faster, more agile fighters to probe the Vanguard's defences, while larger capital ships hung back, waiting for an opening. "Captain," Kale said, her voice tense as she monitored the sensor feeds. "They're deploying boarding pods. If those reach our hull, it'll be chaos." Jax clenched his jaw. "We can't let them get inside." He barked orders to the gunners and security teams, who raced to the outer bulkheads to prepare for the inevitable. The ship's turrets flared to life, plasma beams lancing into the darkness, tearing apart incoming pods before they could latch onto the hull. Despite the intense defense, one pod managed to dock on the lower engineering deck, the very heart of the ship. Jax didn't hesitate. "I'm going down there. Kyle, you're with me. We can't lose the engine room." They moved quickly through the labyrinthine corridors, past flickering lights and damaged panels. The distant sounds of combat echoed through the ship. The clash of energy weapons, shouted commands, the pulse of determination. When they reached engineering, the scene was grim. Alien boarding parties had breached the bulkhead, engaging with the engineers who'd been defending the core. Jax's hands instinctively found his plasma cutter. Kale hefted a jury-rigged pulse rifle, her face set with grim resolve. "Hold them off while I reroute power," Jax ordered. Dodging blasts and strikes, he reached the core's control panel. The fusion reactor's temperature was rising dangerously. If the aliens sabotaged the core, the entire ship would be lost. "Diverting emergency coolant to the core," Jax muttered, fingers flying. "We need to stabilize the fusion chamber or we're done." The hum of the reactor steadied, but the danger was far from over. He could hear Kale's steady fire behind him, buying precious seconds. Suddenly, a shadow loomed over the control console. Jax spun, plasma cutter raised just as an alien soldier lunged. The fight was brutal but quick. Jax's tool sliced through the attacker's armour, sending it crashing to the floor. Breathing heavily, he looked back at Kyle. "We can't hold them forever." "We buy time," she replied fiercely. "The rest of the crew is fighting too." They moved to seal the bulkhead, activating emergency lockdowns. The hiss of pressurization and magnetic seals was a small comfort in the chaos. As they returned to the bridge, Jax felt the weight of the moment settle over him. This wasn't just about one ship or one battle anymore. It was about the survival of humanity's spirit. Stubborn, unyielding, fierce. Back on the bridge, the battle had escalated. Enemy ships swarmed closer, using the cover of debris and smoke. But the Vanguard fought back with everything it had. Railguns firing massive projectiles, plasma turrets weaving deadly arcs of energy, and clever tactics born from desperation and brilliance. Jax took a deep breath, gripping the command chair. "All hands, brace for impact. This ship is our home, and we will protect it at all costs." Explosions rocked the hull, but the shields held. The crew's cheers and determination filled the room, a chorus of defiance against the darkness. Hours later, the enemy fleet began to withdraw, battered and broken. The Helios Vanguard was scarred but victorious. Jax allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. They had turned the tide, proving that even a mechanic could become a captain when the stakes were high enough. But he knew this victory was only the beginning. The war for humanity's future was far from over, and he would be ready for whatever came next. The silence that followed the enemy fleet's withdrawal was as heavy as the smoke that still lingered in the Helios Vanguard's corridors. The ship, battered and bruised, drifted in the cold void, scarred by the battle but not broken. Yet the cost of survival was written on every face aboard. Jax Marlowe sat heavily in the command chair, exhaustion threatening to drag him under. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the weight of responsibility. They had won this fight, yes, but at what price? The ship's life support systems were strained, damage reports streamed in, and the crew was stretched thin, many injured, some lost. "Status report," Jax commanded, voice hoarse but steady. Hera's voice filled the bridge, calm and precise. "Shields are operational, but at reduced capacity. Hull integrity at 68%. Power reserves are stable, but auxiliary systems are offline pending repairs. Medical bays report 32 casualties, 5 critical." Jax's jaw tightened. He pushed away the weariness. This was no time for rest. The enemy would regroup and return, and they would need to be ready. "Send teams to repair bulkhead breaches and stabilize the fusion core," he ordered. "Kyle, you and your engineering crew coordinate damage control. Every second counts." Kyle gave a short nod, already moving toward the nearest console. "We'll get her patched up, Captain. She's a tough old lady." As the Vanguard's crew scrambled to mend the wounds of battle, Jax found himself wandering the dimly lit corridors. The ship was eerily quiet, save for the distant hum of machinery and the occasional murmur of injured crew being tended. In the medical bay, Lieutenant Arryn was overseeing triage, her face pale but determined. Jax approached quietly. "How are they holding up?" he asked. "Survivors are strong, but morale is fragile," Arryn said. "Many are scared, but they trust you. You gave them hope." Jax nodded, the weight of her words settling deep inside. Hope was fragile, like a flickering candle in a storm, but it was all they had. Later, back in the command center, Jax convened a meeting with his senior officers. The room was somber but focused. "We held the line today," he began, "but the enemy will return, stronger and smarter. We need to be ready, not just to survive, but to fight back." Kyle leaned forward. "We can upgrade the railguns further, increase their firing rate, but it'll take time and resources," Arryn added. "We need to improve crew training and morale. Fear spreads faster than enemy fire." Jax considered the options. Time was a luxury they didn't have, but survival depended on adaptation and resilience. "Then that's what we do," he said. "We rebuild, we train, we innovate. We show them that humanity doesn't just survive, we fight." As the hours bled into days, the crew of the Helios Vanguard transformed their battered ship into a fortress. Engineers laboured tirelessly, medical teams tended wounds and spirits alike, and soldiers drilled relentlessly. Jax found moments to walk among them, sharing words of encouragement and quiet strength. They no longer saw him as just a mechanic or an impromptu captain. They saw a leader who embodied their collective will to endure. Yet beneath the surface, a storm brewed. The enemy had not forgotten their prize, and whispers of a larger fleet amassing beyond the nearby star system reached the bridge. One evening, Jack stood by the viewport, watching the stars wheel silently overhead. He thought of the countless lives lost, the sacrifices made, and the uncertain future ahead. "We're not done yet," he murmured to himself. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. Hera's voice was steady. "Captain, sensors detect a fleet signature emerging from hyperspace. Estimated time to engagement, 2 hours." Jax's gaze hardened. The real test was about to begin. He turned to the bridge crew, voice firm and resolute. "Prepare for battle. Humanity's fight isn't over, not by a long shot." As the Helios Vanguard braced for the next wave, Jax felt a fierce pride swelling within him. They had taken a broken ship and made it a symbol of resistance. They had turned a mechanic into a captain, and no matter what came next, they would face it together. Because when the galaxy counted humanity out, they hadn't counted on the heart that refused to stop beating. The distant hum of the Helios Vanguard's engines felt like a heartbeat in the cold void of space, steady and defiant against the impending storm. Jax Marlowe stood on the bridge, eyes locked on the tactical display as the incoming fleet signature grew larger, an ominous constellation of enemy warships, their weapons gleaming with deadly intent. The silence before the storm was thick with tension, but Jax's mind was a furnace of focus. "This is it," he said quietly, voice carrying the weight of command. "All hands, brace for contact, every system to battle stations." The crew responded without hesitation. The tired, ragtag survivors became warriors once more. Plasma turrets primed, railguns charged, and emergency protocols ready to spring into action. Kyle was already running diagnostics on the weapon systems, her fingers dancing over the controls like a maestro conducting a symphony of destruction. "They're approaching at sublight speeds, no signs of cloaking or stealth," she reported. "This is a full assault." Jax nodded grimly. Then we give them a fight they won't forget. The first salvo struck with the force of a meteor shower. Energy beams tore into the Vanguard's shields, which flared red under the onslaught, but held firm, just barely. Explosions rippled across the hull, sending shockwaves through the ship. The bridge shook violently and the air smelled of ozone and burning metal. "Return fire," Jax commanded, voice rising over the din. "Focus on the lead cruisers, take out their command vessels if we can." The railguns thundered, spitting massive projectiles that carved arcs of devastation through the enemy formation. Explosions blossomed in the void as enemy ships were torn apart, but for every one that fell, 2 more pressed forward. Jax's eyes flicked to the crew manning the consoles, engineers rerouting power, gunners tracking targets, medics standing ready. Despite exhaustion, their resolve burned brighter than ever. "Captain, boarding pods detected again," Cale warned. "They're coming in faster than last time." Jax gritted his teeth. "Deploy countermeasures and activate point defense lasers. I want those pods destroyed before they hit the hull." The Vanguard's turrets spun, blasting the pods into fiery wreckage before they could breach. Still, a handful slipped through, detonating on the outer decks. The ship shuddered as boarding parties launched, engaging in brutal close-quarters combat. Jax didn't hesitate. "Security teams, fall back and regroup at Section Delta. Hold the line." He grabbed a pulse rifle from the armory, feeling its weight, a reminder that leadership sometimes meant fighting alongside those you lead. Moving through the corridors, Jax encountered the grim realities of war. Wounded crew, burned panels, and the eerie glow of emergency lighting. In the narrow hallways, he found security teams locked in desperate firefights with alien soldiers, fast, ruthless, and well-armed. Jax joined the fray, his rifle spitting controlled bursts of plasma. His training as a mechanic gave him an edge in improvisation, turning the ship's environment into a maze of traps and ambush points. "Fall back," he shouted. "Regroup and push them towards the bulkhead breaches. We'll seal them off." With fierce determination, the defenders slowly pushed the invaders back. The ship was a battleground, every corridor a testament to human resilience. Back on the bridge, Cale's voice crackled over the comms. "Captain, power fluctuations in the fusion core. It's unstable." Jax's stomach clenched. "Can you stabilize it?" "Trying, but it'll take time. We can't afford another hit like before." He swallowed hard and steadied himself. "Do what you can. I'll hold the line." The battle raged for hours, each moment a brutal test of endurance. The Helios Vanguard took hit after hit but refused to fall. Its crew fought with the fury of those who understood what was at stake: their home, their future, their very existence. Finally, as the alien fleet began to falter under relentless fire and tactical brilliance, Jax felt a surge of hope. The enemy ships, battered and bleeding energy, started to retreat. "Pursuit!" a tactical officer called out. "No," Jax said firmly. "We've won this battle, but the war isn't over. We hold position, regroup, and prepare for what comes next." The bridge erupted in quiet cheers, relief mingling with exhaustion. Jax allowed himself a brief smile, then looked out at the stars still shining cold and distant. They had faced annihilation and come back from the brink. He was no longer just a mechanic. He was their captain, the spark that refused to die. The aftermath of the battle left the Helios Vanguard scarred but alive, drifting through the vast emptiness of space like a battle-worn titan. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, silent witnesses to the price humanity had paid and the promise it refused to break. Jax Marlowe stood on the bridge, the hum of the ship beneath his feet a steady reminder of life amid ruin. The crew around him moved with tired precision, repairing, tending wounds and preparing for the inevitable next encounter. This was no victory parade. It was a hard-won respite in a war far from over. "Captain," Cale's voice came through the comms, calm but weary. "The railguns are operational at full capacity again. We've patched the fusion core stabilizers. We're ready to fight if we have to." Jax nodded, absorbing the weight of her words. "Good. Keep them ready. This ship has fought through hell and back. She won't be the first to fall." He looked around the bridge, at the faces of his crew, their eyes tired but burning with quiet defiance. They were more than survivors now. They were a symbol, a living testament to human resilience in the face of extinction. A comm alert interrupted the moment. Jax tapped the console and brought up a secure message from the fleet command. The transmission crackled with static, but the voice was clear, urgent. "Vanguard, this is Admiral Soren. Your actions have turned the tide of the battle. Reinforcements are en route, but the enemy is regrouping. We need you to hold the line and buy us time." Jax's grip tightened around the console. "Understood, Admiral. We'll hold. Humanity isn't done yet." The transmission ended, leaving a heavy silence filled only by the low whir of the ship's systems. Jax allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He thought back to the mechanic he once was, the man who only wanted to fix engines and keep the ship running, never to lead in the heat of war. But war changes people. It reveals the depths of their courage and the strength they never knew they had. He thought of every crew member who had fought, fallen, or bled alongside him. Their sacrifices were the fire that forged their future. Suddenly a soft chime interrupted his reverie. The tactical console blinked with a new sensor reading, a distant signal from a nearby system. Kale's voice returned, laced with curiosity. "Captain, we're picking up a distress beacon. It's old, but definitely human. Could be survivors." Jax's heart tightened. "Set course. If there's even a chance, we'll take it." As the Helios Vanguard changed trajectory, the crew rallied with renewed purpose. Their ship was no longer just a vessel of war, it was a beacon of hope in the dark. Days later, they reached the source, a derelict colony ship drifting in silence, its hull battered but intact. Boarding teams found survivors, exhausted, frightened, but alive. Among them were engineers, medics, families, remnants of humanity scattered and forgotten. Jack stood on the airlock watching as the survivors stepped aboard, their faces alight with gratitude and cautious hope. "This is what we fight for," he told Kale quietly. "Not just survival, but the chance to rebuild, to thrive." Kale smiled tiredly. The spark lives on. In the weeks that followed, the Helios Vanguard became a sanctuary and a rallying point. The stories of their defiance spread through the fleet, inspiring others to resist, to rise. Jax found himself standing before the crew in the ship's mess hall, his voice steady and filled with conviction. "We faced impossible odds. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and pushed to the brink. But we didn't give up. We fought with everything we had, not because we wanted to win, but because we refused to lose." He paused, eyes meeting those of every crew member. "We are humanity's last line. Not just a ship or a crew, but a symbol. And symbols don't die." The room erupted in cheers, a fierce roar of unity and hope. As the Helios Vanguard prepared to join the larger fleet, ready to turn the tide of the war, Jax looked to the stars one last time. This was only the beginning. The legacy of fire they carried was far greater than any weapon or technology. It was the unbreakable spirit of humanity itself,